Congressman, thanks for joining us. You and I spoke, I think, this week on GMA3, and it was great to have you. Your state has the largest Jewish population in all of the U.S., so I first have to ask you, after all the events of this week, how is the Jewish community in your state doing?
Look, the Jewish community here in the Bronx, elsewhere in New York, is in a state of deep mourning. Not since 9/11 have I seen so much shock and trauma and pain. The Jewish community is so closely knit, so intertwined with Israel as a Jewish state, that just about everyone either lost someone or knows someone who has lost someone. And so there's a widespread sense of mourning and grief and pain. And the support that the United States is providing Israel in this moment of need has been comforting and has inspired hope in many.
Yeah, Congressman, I just wanted to mention for the folks who are watching, the pictures we're seeing are live from Gaza right now, and you're seeing obviously some dark plumes of smoke there. President Biden says his administration is doing everything in its power to free Americans trapped in Gaza, as well as support Israel in its mission to completely wipe out Hamas. In your estimation, how is that going so far?
It's too early to tell, but Israel's about to undertake the most complicated military operation in its history. We have to keep in mind the context that Israel did not start the war. The war was imposed upon Israel by the barbaric terrorism of Hamas. And in order to defend itself, Israel has concluded rightly that it must dismantle Hamas. But in order to dismantle Hamas, it has to launch a ground invasion into the Gaza Strip. And launching a ground invasion in a densely populated urban center where Hamas often uses civilians as human shields, often hides military assets and civilian infrastructure, that is a nightmarishly complicated situation. So Israel has the challenge of fighting a defensive war on nightmarishly complex terrain, and it will likely result in casualties on both sides. But again, this is not a war of Israel's making. Israel wants peace. Israel has peace agreements with a whole range of Arab countries, Jordan, Egypt, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco. It was on the verge of brokering a peace with Saudi Arabia. The greatest threat to peace in the Gaza Strip is Hamas.
As you well know, aid for Israel hangs in the balance with no current Speaker of the House. Are you concerned about those implications with this stalemate that Congress could have? Now we see Jim Jordan getting the votes, but he doesn't really have enough votes. I mean, when could that end, and are you concerned about it?
I have real concerns that the dysfunction and extremism and incompetence of House Republicans is a national security risk. If the Democrats had the majority and if Hakeem Jeffries had the speakership, we would have taken action immediately to provide Israel with the support and the funding that it needs to defend itself in the face of unprecedented terrorism. Dysfunction is no friend of the U.S.-Israel relationship, and that's what we've seen from House Republicans.
Yeah, or Ukraine or almost anything else. A growing number of your fellow Democrats are starting to condemn Israel for its attacks on Gaza, including Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, who called Israel's orders for 1 million Palestinians to leave Gaza, these are her words, she called it an ethnic cleansing. So is the U.S., first of all, I want your response to that, but then is the U.S. doing enough to speak out against an unfolding humanitarian crisis? Do you think ethnic cleansing is a bit strong for the situation? How do you feel about those statements?
The notion that Israel is committing ethnic cleansing and genocide is absurd. And keep in mind that the critics of Israel have been accusing Israel of committing genocide long before the conflict. Israel is in an enormously complicated situation. If you believe, as I do, that Israel has the right to defend itself, in order to defend itself, it has to drive Hamas out of power. If Israel were to keep Hamas in power, it would run the risk of an even deadlier terrorist attack against its own people in the future. And Israel cannot afford a Hamas that's empowered to perpetrate deadly terrorist attack against its own people. The highest responsibility of any government, whether it's the United States or Israel, is to protect its people.
A former Hamas official called for a day of anger, a day of rage, a day of jihad yesterday, and we saw the NYPD out in full force with 33,000 officers in uniforms. I'm wondering, anti-Semitism in recent years has been increasing, and now with what's happening with Israel and Hamas, there have been threats. We saw a few things happen across the globe yesterday. What steps is your office taking to combat that in your district?
Well, I have real concerns that the conflict in the Middle East and the disinformation against Israel is going to inspire an outbreak of anti-Semitic violence and vandalism and vitriol. And so we're in close communication with New York City government, with the NYPD, to ensure that our Jewish institutions, our synagogues, our Jewish day schools are protected from the threat of anti-Semitism. And thankfully, there have been no credible threats. But I've been visiting synagogues and Jewish day schools myself just to provide support and to know that their elected officials stand with them.
Congressman Richie Torres, thank you so much. Always good to talk to you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.